Some of the most brilliant, emotionally aware, and deeply perceptive people you will ever meet in your life are also the most profoundly, deeply exhausted. If you look at them from the outside, they seem to have it all together. But underneath the surface, they are carrying an invisible weight. This isn't the kind of fatigue that comes from a long day of hard physical labor or running a marathon. You can't just fix this with a good night's sleep or a cup of coffee. This is a deep, soul-crushing exhaustion that is generated entirely by their own minds. While the rest of the world is fast asleep, these individuals are wide awake at 2 a.m., completely trapped inside their own heads. They lie there staring at the ceiling, completely powerless as their brain decides to replay a random, insignificant conversation from 3 years ago. They dissect every single word that was said, analyzing the tone, the body language, and the hidden meanings, wondering if they made a mistake. And it doesn't stop there. Immediately after replaying the past, their mind shifts gears and begins mapping out incredibly complex, terrifying, worst-case scenarios for the future. Events and catastrophes that will likely never happen in reality. This creates a brutal, painful psychological paradox right at the center of who they are. The exact same mental traits that make a person thoughtful, deeply empathetic, and incredibly perceptive are the very same mechanisms that quietly hollow them out from the inside. Their ability to feel deeply, to care about others, and to notice the subtle shifts in someone's mood is undeniably a superpower. But it comes with a massive hidden cost. It acts as a constant, exhausting, and unyielding internal tax on their intelligence. Because they are smart enough to see every single variable, every potential outcome, and every hidden danger, their mind treats every piece of information as a puzzle that absolutely must be solved right now. They are cursed with a high-powered engine but no brakes, meaning their greatest intellectual gifts are the very things causing them internal agony. Psychologists have a very specific name for this endless, agonizing mental loop, and they call it maladaptive rumination. It is incredibly important to understand that this behavior is absolutely not a sign of emotional weakness, a lack of willpower, or simple everyday anxiety. This isn't just someone worrying too much because they can't handle stress. Groundbreaking data and research coming straight out of Yale and the University of Michigan reveals something far more fascinating. It shows that chronic overthinkers possess brains that are actually exceptionally advanced at pattern recognition. Their neural wiring is highly sophisticated, meaning their minds are built to connect dots that other people don't even see. Because of this advanced wiring, an overthinker's mind operates like a highly sensitive military radar system that never shuts down. It is constantly, relentlessly scanning the environment for potential threats, calculating an infinite number of future variables, and digging beneath the surface to search for deeper meaning in every single interaction. If a friend sends a slightly shorter text message than usual, or if a boss uses a specific tone in a meeting, the radar immediately goes off. The core problem here is never a lack of intelligence. In fact, it is quite the opposite. The issue is that the brain is so incredibly good at processing data and creating loops that it never receives the necessary chemical signal to just stop. The cognitive system keeps running, burning fuel and generating heat, completely unable to find the off switch. When you look inside the physical architecture of the brain, this constant mental exhaustion boils down to an intense, nonstop battle between two of the heaviest hitters in your head, the prefrontal cortex and the default mode network. To understand why your mind won't shut up, you have to look at what these two systems are actually designed to do. The prefrontal cortex is the command center sitting right behind your forehead. It is the logical, high-powered executive responsible for critical thinking, deep analysis, future planning, and intense problem solving. On the other side, you have the default mode network, which acts as your brain's background operating system. This is the network that kicks in when you aren't actively focusing on a specific task. It is the engine behind your internal monologue, your daydreaming, and that quiet voice in your head that talks to you when you are just sitting doing nothing. In a typical balanced brain, these two systems have a healthy work-rest cycle. When a person finishes a difficult task or lies down to relax, these neural regions naturally power down, step off the gas, and enter a state of peaceful downtime. But in the brain of a chronic overthinker, these two heavy hitters never get the memo to rest. Instead, they stay perpetually redlined, running at absolute maximum capacity 24 hours a day. It is the neurological equivalent of leaving your car engine idling at full throttle while it's parked in the garage. Because of this, your mind remains entirely, aggressively online at all times. Even when you are physically exhausted and desperately trying to relax, your default mode network is frantically generating a non-stop internal monologue, while your prefrontal cortex is aggressively auditing your past mistakes, dissecting your flaws, and drafting incredibly complex, hyper-detailed scripts for future confrontations and arguments that will never actually happen in real life. What is truly fascinating is that this grueling, exhausting habit almost never originates in adulthood. It is not a random personality trait you just woke up with one day. It is almost always a deeply ingrained survival strategy that was forged and hardened in an unpredictable, unstable childhood environment. When a child grows up in a household where they have to constantly walk on eggshells because a parent or guardian's moods shift violently without warning, their young brain is forced to adapt. The same thing happens if they grow up in an environment where minor, innocent mistakes are met with massive, completely disproportionate emotional or physical consequences. In those high-stress moments, the developing brain makes a brilliant, logical calculation to protect itself from pain. Through these difficult experiences, your young, fragile nervous system learned a powerful lesson. It learned that hypervigilance equaled absolute safety. Your brain realized that if it could just look far enough ahead, notice every microscopic shift in someone's body language, and anticipate every single negative variable, it might be able to protect you from being hurt, blamed, or rejected. You trained your mind to believe that predicting the future was the only shield you had. Therefore, when you look at it through the lens of trauma and survival, overthinking is absolutely not a design flaw, a mental defect, or a sign of weakness. It is actually a highly sophisticated, incredibly smart nervous system doing exactly what it was trained to do to keep you safe and alive in a world that once felt deeply unsafe. To truly understand how this mental cycle operates, you have to look at how modern psychology divides this continuous loop of thought into two completely distinct and opposite categories: reflective rumination and brooding rumination. On one hand, you have reflection, which is the healthy, productive side of the coin. Reflection is an active, conscious choice to turn your focus inward so you can genuinely process your emotions, understand your reactions, build deep self-awareness, and ultimately grow as a person. When you reflect, you are acting like an objective scientist looking at your own life, asking honest questions like, "Why did that bother me?" Or, "What can I learn from this situation to do better next time?" This version of thinking is useful because it actually leads to clarity, emotional maturity, and positive change. But then there is the dark side of the mind, which psychologists call brooding rumination. And this is where overthinking becomes incredibly dangerous. Brooding is not active or productive. It is a passive, heavy, and deeply distressing fixation on your problems, your flaws, and your perceived failures, without a single ounce of movement toward an actual solution. When you brood, you aren't trying to learn or grow. You are just standing in the middle of a burning room, complaining about the heat. You repeat phrases in your head like, "Why does this always happen to me?" Or, "I completely ruined everything," over and over again. This dark pattern is exactly what triggers immediate, suffocating decision paralysis, severe sleep deprivation, and intense social anxiety that convinces you everyone is judging you. The ultimate trap for an overthinker is that these two states look almost identical from the inside. You slide from healthy, honest reflection into toxic, destructive brooding so smoothly and invisibly that you don't even realize you've crossed the line until you are already drowning in the spiral. This invisible slide happens because of a highly deceptive psychological phenomenon known as the illusion of mental progress. Because your brain is working incredibly hard, burning massive amounts of energy, and generating intense emotional heat, it genuinely feels like you are doing important work. Your mind tricks you into believing that because you are focusing on the problem so intensely, you must be getting closer to solving it. In reality, you aren't moving forward at all. You are just spinning your wheels in the mud, digging a deeper and deeper hole. You are confusing the act of worrying with the act of problem solving, and your brain is completely blind to the difference. To make matters worse, there is a sinister chemical trap happening at a neurological level involving dopamine, the brain's main reward chemical. Your brain is hardwired to release a small hit of dopamine whenever it successfully engages in problem-solving behavior. The terrifying catch is that your brain will release this feel-good chemical even when the problem-solving is completely imaginary and taking place entirely inside your head. When an overthinker runs through a fake scenario for the 50th time, analyzing every single angle and constructing complex mental arguments, the brain registers that high-level activity as a success. It rewards you with dopamine just for the act of thinking, not for actually arriving at a real-world answer. You are literally being chemically incentivized and rewarded by your own biology to keep worrying and spiraling. This is exactly why telling a chronic overthinker to just stop thinking about it is so profoundly neurologically naive. You are asking them to easily override a deeply rooted chemical addiction and reward system that their own brain is actively feeding every single second they stay in the loop. Even though carrying this heavy cognitive engine can feel like a nonstop curse, it actually carries a massive, life-altering hidden benefit that most people completely overlook. It turns out that your mind isn't just generating useless static. It is running a highly advanced, ultra-sensitive processing system. A groundbreaking study published in the journal Psychological Science confirmed this by revealing that chronic overthinkers score significantly higher than the average person in a trait known as cognitive empathy. This means that your brain's intense habit of analyzing everything has actually gifted you with a profound psychological superpower. You aren't just overanalyzing social situations because you are insecure. You are doing it because your mind is uniquely capable of picking up on data points that other people completely miss. Because of this advanced internal wiring, you are naturally, effortlessly attuned to the most subtle social nuances in your environment. You are highly perceptive to exactly how words land, noticing the micro-expressions, the slight pauses, and the tiny shifts in tone when someone speaks. You possess a rare emotional radar that makes you incredibly aware of the unspoken emotional texture in any room you walk into. You can instantly feel the tension, the discomfort, or the hidden sadness in a person before they even open their mouth. The beautiful, comforting truth here is that the exact same mental mechanism that exhausts you and keeps you awake at 2 a.m. is the very same engine that makes you remarkably perceptive, deeply empathetic, and profoundly human. Your overthinking is just the messy byproduct of your incredible capacity to care, notice, and connect with the world on a level that most people can only dream of. But let's be entirely direct. Possessing this level of raw perception without a proper psychological release valve is absolutely agonizing. It is a beautiful gift, but it leaves you entirely exposed to the weight of the world, and the hard, undeniable truth of modern psychology is incredibly simple. You absolutely cannot think your way out of a thinking problem. You cannot use the exact same tool that created the trap to break you out of the cage. When you try to analyze your anxiety to make it go away, you are just throwing more wood onto the fire. The mind has its limits, and some things in this life simply cannot be solved by your intellect. They cannot be figured out, rationalized, or conceptualized. Instead, they must be deeply felt, firmly decided, or completely and utterly released. This is exactly why professional therapists don't waste time trying to force chronic overthinkers to just stop having thoughts. Instead, they treat this exhausting cycle using a highly effective technique called cognitive diffusion, which is the practice of learning to observe a thought without fusing your entire identity to it. It is the art of realizing that just because your mind creates a thought, that doesn't mean the thought is a factual reality or that you have to believe it. This technique creates a critical, life-changing shift in your internal dialogue. It takes you away from the terrifying belief of this situation is dangerous and I must fix it right now, and gently moves you toward the objective observation of my brain is currently generating a threat response and creating a worst-case scenario. That tiny microscopic bit of psychological distance changes absolutely everything. It turns you from a helpless prisoner drowning in the middle of a raging mental storm into a calm observer standing safely on the shore, watching the clouds pass by without letting them pull you under. When you step back and look at the entire picture, you need to realize something and accept it as an absolute truth. Overthinking is not a personality defect. It is not a character flaw. It is not a weakness. And it is absolutely not a sign of emotional instability. You are not broken, and your mind is not defective. What you are experiencing is simply the deep, permanent footprint of a highly active, incredibly brilliant mind that learned to stay alert in a world that once felt profoundly unsafe. Your hypervigilance, your constant analyzing, and your endless mental loops are actually monumentally successful defense mechanisms. They are living proof of your resilience. Your brain didn't start spiraling to torture you. It started spiraling to shield you from pain, rejection, and chaos when you had no other way to protect yourself. It built a massive, heavy suit of psychological armor because it believed you were constantly standing on a battlefield. Therefore, the ultimate goal of healing is not to force your mind into absolute unnatural silence, nor is it to fight your thoughts and hate your brain for doing what it does. Trying to violently suppress your thoughts is like trying to hold an inflatable ball underwater. It only creates more tension, more resistance, and more exhaustion. The real objective here is much more gentle, profound, and freeing. The goal is to teach your nervous system, with immense patience and deep self-compassion that the old threat is officially gone. You need to consistently show your mind that the environment that forced you to build that heavy armor no longer dictates your reality today. It is about actively signaling to your body that you are finally, truly safe enough to put the heavy weapons down, step off the battlefield, and let your guard drop. You are safe enough to stop anticipating the next blow, safe enough to trust the quiet moments, and finally, safe enough to just rest.